Second Look, an in-depth probe of the people and events behind the news. Second Look is a presentation of the KPRC Radio News and Public Affairs Department. Now, Second Look.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of your promoter, Mr. Paul Boesch, a big welcome to the Sam Houston Coliseum for what could be the greatest night of wrestling in history.
Every Friday night, thousands of people gather in the Sam Houston Coliseum to watch men, women, and sometimes midgets supposedly try to beat each other's brains out. Now, whether they really do that or not is something you ought to judge for yourself. A lot of people think wrestling is fake. The people in and around wrestling deny that allegation. I spent some time around wrestling and came to the conclusion that whether it's fake or not, it serves its purpose well. You can most easily look at this thing called professional wrestling in three categories: the promoter, the wrestler, and the fan. We'll go to the matches in just a minute.
This was supposed to be some famous movie star talking to you for the National Kidney Foundation. The truth is, we've been trying for some time now to get a big celebrity to tell you about kidney disease, but we simply weren't able to. Then we realized that the reason we couldn't get a celebrity to contribute his time and effort was perhaps the same reason we can't get many of you to contribute money. The problem is no one takes kidney disease seriously. You think of us as just another charity, and you have to draw the line somewhere. But a disease that afflicts 8 million people in this country, a disease that kills more people each year than automobile accidents, should be taken seriously. And the irony is we have some of the answers, but we just don't have the money to use them. Do we have to wait until someone close to you gets kidney disease before you begin to take us seriously? Support the National Kidney Foundation, Box 353, New York, New York. Kidney disease. It's not just another charity. It's the fourth major cause of death in the country.
The man who promotes professional wrestling in Houston is a former wrestler, war veteran, and longtime broadcaster of Houston wrestling, Paul Boesch.
A beautiful crotch and lift and a slam, a nice one by Jose Lothario, and this is the answer to a lot of the assault he's getting from Lubitsch. If he can bounce him enough times, Lubitsch is going to find trouble getting
Paul Boesch is not the big, dumb, illiterate stereotype that you would probably associate with wrestling. He's intelligent, articulate, and personable, and enjoys reminiscing about the good old days.
There were times when the television stores that sold sets would leave sets in the window, put benches outside so people could come up and watch television of wrestling on Friday night. And there were one or two occasions where traffic was stopped because big groups got there and swelled out into the streets. And you'd hear a sudden cheer going up from a knot of people gathered around. Nowadays, it might mean a demonstration or a riot, but then it meant that they were sitting around watching wrestling.
Going back, Boesch told me wrestling enjoyed a new popularity when television began broadcasting the matches.
The earlier days of television incited a resurgence of interest in wrestling, and we were a mainstay on Channel 2 for a long time. Then they replaced us with, or moved us. We used to be on from 8:30 until the wrestling finished, till the main event was over, till everything was all over. Then they decided that there were some of these other important programs that had to go on, programs that have faded out of existence long ago. People can't even remember what they were. We have outlasted all of the high-priced programs, and at present, Houston Wrestling on television is the oldest running program in the country. We're on our 24th year right now.
Boesch took over the promotion end of wrestling after Houston's first promoter, Morris Siegel, died several years ago. Friday night at the Sam Houston Coliseum is a ritual to a certain breed of Houstonian. The crowd that gathers at the wrestling matches is not the same one that goes to the Astrodome for Oilers or Astros games. And the wrestlers are not the all-American type athletes one sees on television extolling the virtues of a razor blade. Before the Friday night spectacle, the wrestlers on the card stand around the downstairs dressing room of the Coliseum, chatting as if they were next-door neighbors. In the ring, they act like their opponent had called the other's mother a dirty name. I talked with a couple of them before they walked into the arena to the cheers and boos of action-hungry fans. One of them was Red Bastien, complete with a full head of red hair and a gay 90s-type handlebar mustache.
You one of the good guys or one of the bad guys? Well, it just depends.
On what, where you are?
No, who I'm wrestling.
I see. Explain that a little further.
Well, I like to wrestle scientific. I like to think that I have enough basic knowledge of wrestling that I can actually pin my opponent or make him submit. But if the other wrestler insists on using unruly tactics, why, then I'd like to think that I can go that way also, because I like a good scrap once in a while myself.
And another was a villainous-looking man, standing about 6'5", packing in close to 300 pounds. He had a look on his face like he wanted to kill everyone that got in his way. And that was when he smiled. What's your name?
Stan Stasiak.
Stan what?
Stasiak.
Stan, how long?
Crusher Stasiak.
Crusher. How long have you been wrestling, Crusher?
Going on 14 years now.
Do you really enjoy it?
Oh, yeah. Great sport.
What made you want to get into it to begin with?
Well, a lot of things, you know. I got into it after playing football up in Canada, and just a challenge, I guess.
The fans in the arena looked like they would have trouble meeting the payments on their roll-your-own cigarette machine, but they consider what they spend every week for wrestling tickets as money well spent. Houston police officer W.L. Cunningham has been working ringside at the matches for 5 years.
The biggest problem we have here is that people get excited, their inner ego builds up, they get alcohol in their system, and they think that they can whip the world. They take these people serious, and they try to get in ringside, and then what the turn of events turns out to be that they wind up fighting the police officer to get in the ring. Most of them really don't understand, and 98% of the people believe that all of this is real. But these men do a good job, a fine job, and like I said before, they're probably the finest actors that anybody could ever produce.
Unlike baseball or football, most of these fans are loyal. When the Oilers have a losing season, the attendance drops off, but the wrestling fans just keep on coming. You're here every week, aren't you? Yes, ma'am. How come you come? How long have you been coming now?
About 28 years.
Why do you come year after year, night after night?
Well, I really don't know. Because some of it's fake, isn't it?
I don't know, is it?
Well, it's rough fake, I'll say that, isn't it?
What do you like about it?
Oh, I just like the wrestler, and I just like to come, that's all.
You ever get real excited here?
Oh, yeah. Get mad, too.
How many years young are you?
65.
You've been coming for 28 years now, huh? You must remember when some of the old-timers were here wrestling.
Yeah, and I got some of the old-time pictures, too. I got some of the autographs, you know what I mean? These things you buy, the programs, back years.
Do you know many of the wrestlers personally?
No. I don't try to get acquainted with them.
Why?
Well, really, I just don't try to get acquainted with them. I see them up there. I know all of them. But as far as trying to get acquainted with them, I don't.
You said the same...
No, not with any of them yet.
Crusher had a few remarks on the loyalty of fans.
Let's face it, it's a very exciting sport. It's the greatest spectator sport in the world. And people love it. And it's a great, great game. Let me put it this way. People just have good taste, that's all.
Now, if you pull these wrestlers aside, they'll readily admit that a big part of wrestling is showmanship. Irish Danny McShain wrestled for 35 years.
Showmanship is something that either you got or you don't have. I mean, you either have it or don't have it. There's only one man in my life I've ever known that developed showmanship that didn't have it, and that was Gorgeous George. He did not have showmanship. He didn't have anything. And in other words, if you are colorful, you are colorful, and it comes natural. And if you don't have it, there's very few, if any, that ever develop it. George was the only one, and he came up with a gimmick to do that. I say a gimmick. He developed the hairdo and the robes and that sort of thing, but I had robes long before Gorgeous George did.
What was your gimmick?
A lot of action, and I literally tore the place up and the man in front of me.
The allegation that wrestling is phony has been heard for many years now, and for those same years, wrestling has turned into a lucrative business for both the promoter and wrestler. Those involved deny it and defend their sport vigorously. Promoter Paul Boesch.
How would you, for instance, like to have the job of standing between Ernie Ladd, who is, let's say, 6'9", and we'll say the Spoiler or Johnny Valentine, who get up there around 6'4" and 5". One man weighs 325 pounds, and the other fellow weighs close to 270 and 290, you see. And you You just arbitrate between them and tell them that you want one of them to lose to the other fellow if he was capable of winning. Do you think you would enjoy this particular job? You're dealing with high-strung individuals. You're dealing with people who have only one way of making their living, and that way is through wrestling. Look at me. I've been around in wrestling now for 40 years. When I started, I was a fine-looking young man like you, handsome, debit. I can say this, you see, I'm because my hair wasn't quite as long. But I didn't have these marks on. I didn't have cauliflower ears and broken nose and broken teeth, and I didn't have scars on my face. I didn't get those from the time that I started in broadcasting. I've gotten these in the ring from people stomping me and hitting me. You can look and say, he didn't hit him. Who's going to prove it? Who's going to disprove your statement, you say? But the truth of the matter is that wrestling is a contest.
Crusher.
Well, all I can say is I've been in it almost 14 years, and anybody says that, they don't know what they're talking about. All they got to do is try it, and they'll find out that the simplest little hole could put them out of commission, maybe permanently. And you can't say that either because, let's face it, this is a fact now, we are the only athletes in the world that cannot get insurance coverage for any injury. Even Lloyd's of London will not insure wrestlers. That's a fact.
Old-timer Danny McShain.
Is wrestling fake?
I answered with a simple no. It cannot be. There are too many people at stake, too much money at stake, too many categories of money that's paid to pay a winner, not a loser.
Officer Cunningham at ringside.
You come here every week. What do you think of it? Well, I've been here 5 years, and it's real good enjoyment for the people that can't get out and see some of the real nice events here in Houston. Paul's been putting on a pretty good show. Everything's looking good. Like I say, most of us that's been here, well, I've been here 5 years, and about 4 other officers have been here 4 years. And we sort of enjoy it. Keeps us awake.
Think it's fake?
Well, I'm not going to say. Everybody to their own opinion.
Let me ask you, you think it's more show than...
I'll put it this way. They're probably some of the finest showmen in the world.
Wrestler Red Bastien.
Well, I think that they're confused in as much as there's a lot of showmanship in wrestling. There is. I think wrestling is one of the foremost showmanship in sports. They're bringing it nowadays into boxing, where you see a lady manager and like Cassius Clay using all the verbal stuff on TV and everything like that. Well, this is stuff that wrestlers have been doing for a long time. But yet people say, well, there has to be a winner. There has to be a loser. Nobody wants a loser. I don't care if you're playing football, baseball, hockey, whatever it is. If you're a loser, no one wants you. And also, if you're a loser, you're not in the main event. If you're not in the main event, you're not making the top money. And that's where it's all at.
I found out some things about wrestling that surprised me. For one, those guys in the ring make a pretty good living.
I would say that a fellow who is in wrestling, just in it, and not very good at it, but he's a body, and he tries, but he doesn't get any place. He's going to make as much as your low or base pay for football, which is somewhere around $12,000 or $13,000. I think it's $12,500, if I'm not mistaken. A fellow who wins some of his matches and who can events, a fellow who wins a good portion of his matches and who gets up, really can put out and can attract people at least a portion of the time. He gets up around the 25 to 40,000 bracket. Fellows like Valentine and Wahoo and people like this, they have years where they go $75,000 and $80,000 without too much trouble. A fellow like Dory Funk Jr., who is the world's heavyweight champion, he makes possibly $250,000, I'd say, without. And I'm just making wild guesses from the money that I know that I pay these fellows for their performances, you say.
And Paul Boesch says that wrestling is often run on unwritten agreements.
I have 12 men wrestling on Friday night. Not one of them has signed a contract yet. Now, this may sound like I'm not doing my business very well, except that if I believe that when a man tells me he's going to be here, he's going to be here. He believes that if I say I'm going to make a deal with him and pay him a certain amount of money or pay him his transportation or whatever I'm going to do, that I'm going to do it. And I better do it, because if my reputation doesn't hold up, then I'm not going to get anybody to come in for me. I couldn't be a promoter without wrestlers, and conversely, they couldn't wrestle and make any money unless they were promoters who were capable of promoting well and selling the attraction to the fans.
Now, if all this excites you and you get the feeling that wrestling is your long-range goal in life, then go see Paul Boesch.
If I came in here and said, Paul Boesch, I want to be a wrestler, what do I do?
Well, people do this all the time. Now, in your case, I'd say, how much do you weigh, you see? And in their case, I sometimes say this, too. Some of the people are people who have jobs and they're working hard, but they can't see themselves getting any place. And the guy thinks back and he said, doggone, I played football 12 years ago when I was in high school. I think I'm going to go down and be a wrestler, you see? And he forgets that the extra 20 pounds that he's gained is hanging right around his middle, you see? He's a middleweight. And he hasn't really done anything. Now, this happens all the time. There are very few of them that I actually encourage. Occasionally, I see a fellow come in who has possibilities. My stock answer, and this is not the wrong answer, is that if I took him over to the gym right now and said, now let's just work out a little bit and see if you can move, you see if you have two left feet or what, that it wouldn't be fair to him because he'd be struggling for breath in a very short time because wrestling has a tendency to reach the most a man can give. It's one of the most difficult and strenuous sports on the individual athlete. So I tell them to go to the gym for 2 or 3 months, to work out on their own, to try to build up muscle, take down their belly, run a little bit, and get in shape. And then I would be pleased to have someone take them there, not for the purpose of seeing how tough they were or anything else, but to see if they had an affinity for the sport, see if a guy likes to get his nose rubbed into the canvas, you see, and whether or not he can execute simple moves that are mandatory in the sport. Then I would shake his hand and say, by golly, I'm glad you came back. And I would possibly go to the gym with him myself and then give him a match, you see, and see how he made out. If he made out fine, well, fine. Now, here is where the similarity between us and other sports would stop. I wouldn't come along and say, now, here's a contract, and I want 20 or 30% of your money. I would say, look, wrestling's going to benefit because you're in it, and you're going to benefit from wrestling being in it. Therefore, whatever you make, great. I'm a promoter. I'll make money if if you turn out to be a star, you see, or you turn out to be good. I'll make money, and you'll have a great livelihood. But I wouldn't be interested in signing that man up. I wouldn't feel right taking his money, you see, to manage him or for training him.
Paul Boesch knows what fans want, and he tries to give them their money's worth. Boesch is also an author and wrote a book of poetry
called Much of Me in Each of These. Many of the poems are devoted to my thoughts on my war experiences, and then others are fancy kind of sunrise, sunset poetry that a lot of people write.
Anything about wrestling?
No, I don't believe there is. I never think in poetic terms about wrestling.
Sure, wrestling is a show or a performance, and it's an athletic event, too. Some of the punches don't land as hard as the wrestlers like to make the fans believe. But the simple fact remains that professional wrestling provides entertainment to a certain type of person and makes for a good living for those involved. Like Officer Cunningham says, it gives the people who can't see some of the nicer events in town something to do. Wrestling gives the fans an outlet to raise a little hell.
Ow, 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 ow! You ain't nothing! That's right, Dennis. You ain't nothing but a cheater.
Do you come here every week?
Every week.
Why?
Why? Because I love this stuff that's called wrestling.
Why do you love it so much? Is it a good show or what?
It's a good sport, and it's a good show, and I love it.
And I'm Bob Allen, KPRC Sports.
Second Look, an in-depth probe of the people and events behind the news. Second Look is produced by Don Watson, executive producer John Davenport. Join us next Sunday evening at 6 for KPRC's Second Look.